Brian Welker couldn't hold back a smile as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. Earlier that day, he had been promoted to shift supervisor at Harding Containers, effective immediately. To top it all off, he had been given the opportunity to work the night shift for the foreseeable future. Most people hate night shifts, but for Brian, it was a very convenient time. His son was in his senior year of high school. He played several sports and attended extracurricular activities. Working nights allowed Brian to attend his son's classes without missing work. Over the years of working nights, he sought medical help on several occasions and developed a sleep schedule that allowed him to get everything done. That's why, on a warm August day, he was crawling around on the rafters in the attic. After he was told about the promotion, he was given Thursday and Friday off with pay. It was a chance to rest and prepare for the new position he was to take on Sunday evening. Brian had been planning for a long time to convert the small space above his detached garage into a small apartment. It was to be his private sanctuary where he could spend his days in peace. He hoped he wouldn't be disturbed or distracted, as was often the case when he tried to sleep at a time when most people were awake. Brian was running cable to connect the internet in his apartment. The Wi-Fi signal from the building simply didn't reach the apartment. He decided to install an extension cord at the end of the attic, closer to the garage, hoping that this would provide a strong signal in the apartment. As he untangled the cord throughout the attic, Brian heard faint noises coming from the house. It was early in the morning, so his wife Brenda was at work. Their son Tim had gone to stay with Brenda's parents for a few days, so the house was probably empty. Brian crawled through the attic toward the source of the sounds. When he was about 5 meters away, Brian was able to identify the source of the sounds. It was his bedroom. The conversation became clear when Brian lowered himself over the unused ventilation grill on the ceiling of their bedroom. Brenda insisted that the old ventilation grill blew cold air on her at night, which often caused her neck to ache. He installed a new vent as far away from Brenda's bed as possible, but didn't remove the old one. That would have meant filling in the hole in the ceiling left after he pulled out the vent pipe. Brian simply left it on the ceiling, but didn't attach it to the ventilation system. He carefully lifted the fiberglass insulation lying on the attic floor and slowly opened the vent. His stomach clenched when he saw his wife of 20 years moving beneath the thin material. Although the sight was painful, Brian couldn't look away. He couldn't stop staring at the ruins of what had once been his marriage. The couple had been at it for several minutes when Brian finally came to his senses. He switched his phone to video mode and carefully placed it on the window so that the camera didn't block the view of the marital bed. Brian recognized the man. It was Bill Grant, a delivery driver at the parcel delivery service where he and Brenda worked. He had recently divorced and had a daughter in Tim's class. "That sounds awful," Brenda replied, but without any emotion. "You wanted to have sex in my bed because you're turned on by the thought that Brian might be better than you? You're acting like it's a competition or something." "It is a competition, at least for men," Grant replied with a quiet chuckle. "You're a sexy woman, and sex with you is great, but knowing that you're married and I'm having sex with you in your husband's bed makes me the winner. It won't be as much fun if Brian catches us here. I don't know why I agreed to this, but it won't happen again. I'm afraid Brian will find out. It will ruin my marriage," Brenda confessed. "Let's make a deal," Grant suggested. "If you turn your husband on, I won't insist that we do it in his bed. As soon as he's back between your legs, we have to go back so I can reclaim my place as the hero." "I can't say no to Brian. He's my husband. I can't just close my legs and wait for him to agree," Brenda reasoned. "He's a man and he wants sex regularly." "Do what you have to do," the guy said. "I'll try to talk Brian out of having sex and minimize these suicidal encounters in my bedroom. I don't even want to think about what would happen if Brian ever caught us." Brian parked his truck in a separate garage. It was hidden from view, so Brenda didn't know he was home, and of course she had no idea he was listening to her conversation. His face was covered in sweat. Sweat dripped from his body onto the insulation covering the attic floor. He didn't allow himself to vomit, knowing how difficult it would be to clean up and how the whole attic would stink. He forced himself to remain still as he listened to the couple get dressed and leave. As he headed for the stairs, Brian thought about what he had just learned. That filthy bastard was entertaining his wife. She was even going to refuse to have sex with him to calm down and please her lover. Brian struggled to suppress a grim smile at the thought. Brenda would have no trouble refusing to have sex with him. After taking a shower, he analyzed the situation and quickly came up with several solutions. He wouldn't let Brenda find out what he knew about her affair. Tim had 2 more years of school left, and Brian decided that he would focus all his attention on his son. He would no longer worry about Brenda. He no longer cared what she wanted or felt. Why should he worry about her when she clearly treated him with utter contempt? He didn't want to leave the house he had spent 15 years renovating so that some low-life jerk could live in it and entertain his wife. Brenda didn't seem to be planning on getting a divorce, so Brian decided to stick it out until Tim finished school. One thing he knew for sure, his apartment would be ready much sooner. Brian decided he would do some serious renovations. Instead of sleeping there during night shifts, it would be his home for the next year and a half. He would need a small kitchen and a full bathroom. By the time Tim finished school and went to college, Brian would have time to make a plan for the future. To do this, Brian called several contractors he knew and made appointments to get estimates. He decided to hire a company to do the work. The work would be done quickly and professionally, and he would pay for it. There was no longer any need to save money by doing everything himself. His raise would easily cover the expenses. For the first time in his life, Brian realized that time was more important to him than money. If he had saved even $1, half of it would have belonged to Brenda. He was done with his old way of life. He had always tried to do as much housework as possible, thinking it would benefit his family. Everything changed when he saw Grant entertaining Brenda. He was going to provide full funding for Tim's college education. In addition, Brian was going to rebuild his life and enjoy it. He no longer felt loyal to his cheating wife. By the time Brenda came home from work and saw him sitting in the kitchen, Brian had already pulled himself together. "You're home already? Did you finish early for some reason?" Brian looked at Brenda and decided that she looked different. She had wrinkles on her face and had gained a few pounds. Why hadn't he noticed this before? Maybe his love for his wife had blinded him, and he hadn't noticed her flaws? He was saddened by how suddenly his feelings for Brenda had changed. But in the end, she was the one who had decided to have an affair. He was just reacting to it. "Yes, there are some minor issues at work. I've been asked to work tonight, starting tonight. I was allowed to go home, pack a lunch, and rest. I'll be back later." "They shouldn't ask you to work nights after a day shift even if you have free time during the day," Brenda said. "You'll be exhausted. At least lie down and get a few hours of sleep." "Good idea," Brian replied. "I'll just go to bed and—" "Wait," Brenda said a little too loudly, remembering the state of the bed. "I just remembered I need to change the sheets." "Okay," Brian replied calmly, smiling grimly at Brenda's embarrassment. "I'll just use the bed in the guest room. You don't have to worry about it." A few hours later, Brian left the house as if he were going to work. He went to a local sports bar, watched a baseball game, and had a few beers. He had planned ahead. One of the contractors Brian spoke to the next day was busy with a project and offered a very good price if Brian agreed to start work immediately. In 2 weeks, the contractor's crew would have to move to a new location a few miles away. Brian agreed and signed a contract stating that work would begin on Monday morning. His night shift would run from Sunday evening to Thursday evening. The factory closed on Friday evening and resumed work on Sunday evening. Brenda knew that Brian didn't have to work on Friday evening, so she was surprised when he got ready for bed the next evening and headed for the guest room. "Why are you going to sleep in the guest room? We won't see each other while you're working the night shift, so why don't you sleep in our bed?" Brenda asked, puzzled. "I worked last night and slept for a few hours this morning while you were at work, so I'm not very tired." "I'm going to watch baseball and then maybe go to the movies," Brian replied, having come up with an excuse in advance. "I'm trying to get used to staying up at night and sleeping in the morning." "I don't want to disturb your sleep if you don't think we should do this," Brian suggested, raising his eyebrows meaningfully. Brenda's reaction was exactly what Brian had expected. If he hadn't heard her talking to her lover, he wouldn't have noticed the brief deer-like look she gave him before smiling faintly. "I'm very tired today. Let's just lie in each other's arms and fall asleep," Brenda replied. "Besides, Tim is home tonight. He might hear us." "Hugging won't help me," Brian replied. "As soon as I hold you in my arms and feel your nipples harden, I'll want to make love to you. If you're ruling out sex, I'll just avoid temptation and sleep in the guest room. You've never worried about Tim hearing us before, so this is just a silly excuse to avoid sex. You really don't need to make anything up. I'm not the type to pressure women." "I know, Brian, you're right. That was pretty lame, and I'm sorry. I'm just tired and not feeling romantic. I hope you understand." "I understand better than you think. Let me know when you're in the mood. If I'm in the same mood, we can meet up." "Good night," Brian replied, turning and heading for the guest room, leaving Brenda with a confused look on her face. On Saturday, Brian played ball with Tim for an hour and then did some chores around the house. When it was time for bed, he walked down the hall to the guest bedroom. Brenda was looking at him, wondering why he was acting so strange. On Sunday evening, Brian left for work early to prepare for his role as a substitute foreman. By the time the workers started arriving, he was feeling pretty good. He didn't tell Brenda that he had been promoted to foreman. She had her own secrets that she kept from him, so it wasn't difficult for him to keep this from her. The shift went smoothly. His subordinates accepted him well. He felt he had a great team. His new position came with more responsibility, but Brian had already encountered all the challenges and knew how to handle them. He settled into his new role without any major problems. When Brian returned home on Monday morning, Brenda had already left for work and the builders were getting started. He spoke briefly with the foreman to make sure they were on the same page, then went inside. He fell asleep right away, but woke up several times to loud noises coming from the workers in his apartment, and once to the ringing of the phone. Cursing himself for not turning off the landline in the guest room, Brian answered with difficulty. "Hello?" "Sorry, Brian. Did I wake you up?" his mother-in-law Beverly asked. "Is that why you called?" Brian asked irritably. "You wanted to know if I was asleep?" "Don't react like that," Beverly replied. "I just wanted you to know that Bill and I heard you're working the night shift, and we won't bother you. If you need us to do anything for Tim while you're asleep, just let us know." Brian hung up without saying a word. He unplugged the phone and thought about how stupid people could be. A few minutes passed, but he fell asleep again. The builders finished the job in less than a week. Brian was surprised that the contractor had completed all the repairs in 4 days. It would have taken him 4 months to do it himself. When he woke up on Friday afternoon, he drove to a furniture store and ordered a double bed, a small kitchen table, 4 chairs, and a small sofa. Then he went to an appliance store and picked out a large flat-screen TV, a refrigerator, an oven, and a microwave. By Monday afternoon, his bachelor pad was ready for permanent living, Brian thought. He smiled, remembering how puzzled Brenda had been when she came home from work on Monday and saw a group of men huddled around the detached garage. She approached Brian as he was talking to the foreman and insisted on a private conversation so he could tell her what was going on. "I'm planning to build an apartment above the garage," Brian said. "I want to be able to sleep for several days at a time without worrying about someone breaking in or calling. I'll put in double insulation to minimize the noise. There won't even be a landline phone. Since I'll be working nights for a while, I think it will be really helpful to have a place where I can sleep without disturbing you and Tim. You won't even know I'm there." "You won't know you're there?" Brenda repeated. "You're my husband and Tim's father. We need to know you're nearby. I'll go to Tim's baseball practices and games. Afterwards, I'll pick him up so we'll spend a lot of time together. Don't worry about it, we can all have dinner together. A few days ago, I asked you to let me know when you were in the mood for some special intimacy, but you haven't taken me up on my offer yet. Are you asking me to satisfy your needs tonight? You're acting like an idiot. Husbands are expected to do more than entertain their wives when they feel like it. We expect conversation, seduction, an exchange of ideas and problems. Marriage isn't just about sex. You know that. Don't you dare lecture me on what a good marriage is," Brian said sternly. "I'll compare my efforts in this marriage to yours any day. Everything will be wonderful. All you have to do is tell me when you want me to come to bed and service you." "I'm not some damn cow who needs or wants to be serviced," Brenda replied sharply. "You won't be servicing me until you sincerely apologize. And along with your apology, I want a nice evening at a nice restaurant, you jerk." Brian smiled broadly and simply walked away, leaving Brenda completely baffled. It was easy for him to keep Bill Grant from demanding sex in the marital bed, but Brenda was concerned about Brian's attitude. He just wasn't the same as he used to be. He was ignoring Brenda, and that bothered her. He had always been a very attentive husband. She decided that she would give Brian an unforgettable evening as soon as he apologized for his rude behavior. She knew he couldn't go without sex for long. A man can't go from having sex 2 or 3 times a week to 0 and remain happy. Brenda was sure he would want the same thing she did. He had been like that since they first met. He was too young to lose interest in sex. By the following Wednesday, Brian had completely moved into his new apartment. The next weekend, Brian had 3 days off for Labor Day. The following Tuesday was the start of Tim's 3rd semester. "How would you feel about going to the Diamondbacks game this weekend?" Brian asked over dinner on Thursday evening. They're playing the Dodgers and fighting for first place. It should be a great series. Really? That would be great. Thanks, Dad, Tim murmured. You know I'm not a big baseball fan, Brenda grumbled. I'll pass on that. I'll find something else to do around the house. I'm sure you will, Brian muttered, but loud enough for Brenda to hear. It's settled. Tim and I are going to the game on Saturday. I can't wait to tell Scooter, Tim murmured. He'll be so jealous. He's a big Dodgers fan. He used to live in Los Angeles. Why don't you invite him to come with you? Brian suggested. Baseball is more fun to watch with friends, especially if they're fans. I'll call him right now. Thanks, Dad, Tim replied excitedly and rushed to the phone. You definitely made Tim's day, Brenda remarked. Baseball is a great way to bond with boys. Horace is a nice, polite young man. Wow, his name is Horace, Brian asked, shaking his head. No wonder he has that nickname. What kind of parents would name their son Horace, unless they hate him or something? Tim told me that Horace's father died of a brain aneurysm 2 years ago, Brenda continued, ignoring her husband's comment about the boy's name. He and his mother moved here this summer to be closer to her parents. They're elderly and in poor health. I'm going to call him Scooter and pretend I never heard his real name, Steve announced when Tim burst back into the room. Scooter's mom let him go, Tim announced, almost jubilant. It's going to be great. On Saturday afternoon, Tim drove his pickup truck to a house in a nice neighborhood. Before he could stop, Scooter was already running out of the house. As soon as the truck was parked, he jumped into the car next to Tim. Mr. Walker, Mom said she wanted to meet you before we leave. I think she wants to make sure you're not a serial killer or something, Scooter suggested. Sorry. No problem, Brian replied, getting out of the car, walking over to the house and ringing the doorbell. The door was opened by a slender, rather modest woman about Brian's age. One look at her and Brian knew that her most striking feature was her legs. They were strong and perfectly shaped. Her running shorts allowed him to admire them fully. Her stomach was flat. My legs look really good compared to the rest of my body, don't they? Scooter's mother asked, much to Brian's dismay. Yes, of course, Brian agreed, noticing the smirk on the woman's face. You have great legs. Do you think I should let my son go to a baseball game with a man who stares at every woman he sees? The boy's mother asked. His mother, I'm trying to raise a gentleman. Brian saw the laughter in the woman's eyes and instinctively knew she was teasing him a little. He decided to play along. What you're really asking is if your son can date men. Because meeting women is the best part of a man's life, Brian replied with a smirk. He needs to learn to appreciate the fairer sex. I'll show him what to look for and how. I hope you'll be less obvious when you're teaching Horace life lessons, the woman said, still smiling. The first thing I'll teach him is to beat up anyone who calls him Horatio, except his mom, of course, Brian joked. I see. My son will learn to be cruel to people who call him by his name and to appreciate women's legs. Is that enough? Not even close, Brian replied. It's important that he gets a well-rounded education and doesn't get hung up on one single female trait. I'm glad to hear that, Scooter's mom replied, and Brian envied her even more. Have a good time and don't forget to call Scooter if you're running late. By the way, my name is Gertrude. Really? Gertrude. What do your friends call you? Brian asked. The men call me Minx, Raven, Candy, or Bubbles. My female friends call me Gertrude, replied the woman with the honest face. I like that. I'm Brian. We're going to be friends, so I'll call you Minx. I like that name. Why am I not surprised? Gertrude replied and laughed. Horace can hang out with you whenever he wants. I like your sense of humor. Tim is a very polite young man, and I'm sure his parents won't mind. Thanks for inviting him to the game. We're a baseball family. I went to every Dodgers home game I could. My father even played in the minor leagues before I was born. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't good enough, Gertrude added. Scooter's a great kid, so it's no problem. I'll keep an eye on him and make sure he gets home safely, Minx. Have a nice day. Why, would that be bad? I was just kidding, Gertrude replied. You'll always be Minx to me, Brian replied quickly and headed for the truck. Brian spent a quiet day playing ball. Scooter managed to catch the ball. Both boys ate too many hot dogs and drank too much soda. They fell asleep in the back seat of the truck before Brian could pull out of the parking lot. When they arrived at Scooter's house, Brian gently woke the boy and walked the sleepy teenager to the front door, where he was greeted by a beaming Gertrude. He probably ate too many hot dogs and drank too much soda, Brian admitted. Of course she did. She was at the baseball game, Gertrude replied. Thank you so much for picking her up and bringing her home. You're welcome. Scooter's a great kid, Minx, Brian replied. See you at the boys' game. Brian established a daily routine that suited him very well. He would come home, eat a hearty breakfast, and then sleep from 9 to 3. Thanks to the extra soundproofing and thick curtains on the windows, he usually slept soundly. Brenda sometimes complained that he always slept in his man cave, even on weekends. But as soon as Brian asked if she needed his help, she immediately changed the subject. Brian decided that she was very worried that Grant would insist on having sex in her bedroom and they would be caught. Brian didn't mind. It meant she wasn't going to ask for a divorce at the moment. His goal of staying married until Tim finished school seemed achievable. Since he worked as a foreman and didn't get enough exercise, Brian bought a home gym that claimed to provide a total body workout. To his pleasant surprise, the gym worked as promised, provided he used it diligently. He attended all of Tim's baseball practices, and soon the coach asked him to coach a few kids on the sidelines while he worked with another group of players. Tim was a decent player and showed signs of improvement, but Scooter was a real discovery for Brian. He showed talent early in the season but was indecisive and timid. Brian coached him as much as he could. They even spent several hours on weekends practicing at the local park. Brian decided that since he wasn't having sex, he might as well relieve some tension by playing baseball with the boys. As Scooter grew more confident, his playing improved dramatically. By mid-season, Scooter was playing at a high level at fourth base and shortstop. Tim was the starting center fielder and played third base. Brian was very proud of both boys' accomplishments. Brian couldn't help but notice that some of the boys' mothers were starting to pay attention to him. For some reason, his jokes really made them laugh. His efforts with the kids were constantly praised. Some of the mothers baked something for the team, but always gave him a piece. Tim's friendship with Scooter and the time Brian spent with the boys naturally led to Gertrude and Brian spending time together. Brian considered her an intelligent friend with a great sense of humor. He decided to ask Gertrude if she had noticed the increased interest in him from the moms. I may not be entirely correct, Minx, but I must ask you a rather personal question, Brian began. Almost a second size, Gertrude replied quickly. What? I don't understand, Brian admitted. When men ask a woman a question and say it's personal, aren't they asking about her bra size? Well, yes, usually, yes, Brian agreed with a smile. In this case, I wanted to know if you've noticed that some of the moms have been treating me differently over the last couple of weeks. Don't you think they've been a little friendlier lately? What are you, Mr. Observant? Gertrude retorted. You really don't know what's going on, do you? I need more information about what's going on before I can answer that question, Brian replied. I understand the infield fly rule. I know you can't throw out the first or last out of an inning at third base, but you're not talking about those baseball axioms, are you? No. I'm talking about the unwritten rule of never stealing a base when you're out, Gertrude continued, becoming more serious. If you paid more attention, you'd know that the friendliest moms on the team are the single moms. You're a great dad, a handsome guy, and you have a good job. That makes you very attractive to them, Gertrude reasoned. But what about the fact that I'm married? Won't they take that into account? Brian asked. Yes, Scooter's mom replied. That's why they haven't tried to seduce you. No one has ever tried before, right? No one has ever seduced me enough for it to be a problem, Brian replied. I'm married, so obviously I can't be a good catch for anyone. Brian, I hate to have to tell you this, but we're friends, so I have to. All mothers know that your wife is cheating on you. It's not that bad. Rumor has it that she refused to have sex with you. You don't sleep together, and it's safe to say that you'll be free in the near future. These women want to sign a contract with you as soon as you're free. Brian was stunned by Gertrude's revelation. How could so many people know about his personal life? Who could know about his sex life or lack thereof? And then he realized, Brenda must have told that bastard that we don't sleep together, and he bragged about it to someone. Do you mean your wife or her lover? Gertrude asked, trying to defuse the situation. I must say, you don't look very surprised by these rumors. Did you suspect that Brenda was cheating on you? No, I never suspected, Brian replied. You didn't know at all? Gertrude asked incredulously. I knew she was cheating, I just never suspected, Brian replied. I don't understand. How could you know without suspecting? It's very simple. I didn't suspect anything until I caught Grant having fun with Brenda in our bed. In a matter of seconds, I went from being sure she was cheating to being sure she was cheating. I stopped suspecting her. That discovery raises more questions than it answers, said his confused friend. You saw them doing the horizontal mambo, and yet you stayed married and didn't go to jail. You're not a swinger, are you? Or are you one of those people who likes to watch? Please don't be one of those perverts. No, don't worry about it, Brian assured him. I've decided to change my priorities. My main goal is to spend a lot of time with Tim and not be a weekend dad. Living with Brenda, rather than divorcing her, seemed like the best way to achieve that. I started working nights, which always affected our sex life. I built a nice apartment above my detached garage and started living there. I told Brenda that this way I could get enough sleep during the day and wouldn't be irritable and nervous about domestic problems. She wasn't thrilled about the arrangement, but Grant told her that every time she had sex with me, he would insist on entertaining her in our marital bed. That seemed to bother her, but not enough to stop entertaining him. She thinks her affair is a secret and wants to keep it that way. I haven't told her, but I won't have sex with her under any circumstances. I went to the clinic and got tested for STDs. I'm healthy, and I want to stay that way. Are you serious? Did you hear that? That bitch? How can she treat a guy like you so badly? What an idiot. Gertrude was outraged. All single moms think you're a great catch. I think you overestimate my attractiveness. I've never been a heartthrob. I have a good job, so maybe that makes me more attractive to some desperate women, Brian suggested. Are you kidding? Look how handsome you are. You have a wonderful smile, Gertrude remarked. You're strong, kind, smart, and great with kids. If I weren't so modest, I'd throw my hat in the ring along with my size 1 bra, I think. I'd better shut up. Thank you for being such a good friend and telling me what people say and think, Brian replied gloomily. I didn't know everyone knew I was a cuckold. It's very humiliating. I can't make my own wife happy. I'm a world-class loser. You're a good man who wants to be a good father to your son. You're strong enough to put up with all this nonsense, and that's why you have such a great relationship with Tim. Horace thinks you're cool, too. Who? Brian asked. It must make you feel better to tease me with the name Horace, Gertrude remarked with a smile. You're a flirt. You're a great friend. You didn't let me get too deep into my own ass. I hope Tim never finds out about this. The horse is already out of the barn, or at least close to it, Gertrude remarked. Horace says Tim knows something's wrong at home. You hardly ever see his mother. He's bound to hear something when so many people know about it. You know what bothers me? Gertrude added. Horace is attached to Heather Grant. How awkward for him and for me. She's a nice girl. She has no idea what a horrible monster her father is. I'm just glad it's not Tim who's hitting on Heather, Brian said. What a mess that would be. I should be grateful for small favors. Horace says Tim is very interested in Holly Ingram, but that shouldn't surprise you. She comes to all the games and watches his every move, said Gertrude with a smile. Yeah, I've noticed she's around. She seems like a nice girl. I knew her father and uncle in school, Brian recalled. They're a good family. 2 days later, Tim's team played in the first round of the district championship. As game time approached, Brian realized he was probably more nervous than Tim. It didn't help that 3 typical single moms were determined to get his attention. Norma Wilson was wearing a tank top. She kept finding reasons to bend over in front of Brian to pick something up or look for something. She kept asking Brian questions about the team and the players. Jillian Patterson was less subtle. For some reason, she needed to stand pretty close to Brian. Brian noticed that all 3 women had simultaneously found a reason to move away from him. He thought it was strange until he heard a familiar voice behind him. I decided to join my husband this afternoon to watch our son play. I didn't think I'd have to fight my way through so many fans to get to him, Brenda remarked louder than necessary. What's going on, Brian? The game hasn't started yet, but Tim looked really good in practice, Brian replied, trying to brush off the question. Nice try, Brenda replied sharply. Why are these women swarming around you like flies around shit? Good thing you're not allergic to silicone. If you want me to explain how the female brain works, you're out of luck. I have no idea, Brian admitted. I'm actually surprised you're here. My son is playing in an important game. I'm here to support him. Obviously, there are other mothers here. Obviously, some of them aren't just here for their children. You've been too busy to come to the games, Brian remarked. How did you get out of your commitments today? Brenda glanced at her husband when he mentioned her commitments. She wondered for a moment if he was hinting at something. But as soon as the thought crossed her mind, she dismissed it. If he suspected anything, he would be much angrier and more confrontational. She knew one thing about Brian. He would never forgive her for cheating on him. If he found out, he would make sure she knew it in no uncertain terms. I made time. This game is important to Tim, and that means it's important to me. I haven't seen you since you started working nights, so I thought it would be nice to spend some time together cheering for Tim, Brenda explained. When Brenda and Brian sat down in the stands, she noticed that several other mothers were looking at her, and they didn't look very friendly. Brenda wondered what she could have done to upset the other moms. It was her first game, and she hadn't spoken to any of them, so she couldn't think of a reason why they might dislike her. Brenda noticed Gertrude sitting off to the side. As usual, she didn't stand out, although Brenda noticed that her hair was professionally styled and her legs looked good in shorts that were perhaps a little short, especially considering the cool weather. The game began, and Brian's attention was drawn to the playing field. The first two players missed before Tim took the field, and Brenda became concerned for her son when she saw how fast the first ball flew and how close it came to his head. The second ball was low and headed toward Tim, but he caught it confidently and threw it to first base, earning a double play. Scooter was up next. Brenda noticed that he looked older, stronger, and more confident than he had last summer. The first pitch flew into the catcher's mitt near Scooter's head. If he hadn't leaned back, she could have hit the ball. Brenda heard Brian chuckle as Scooter prepared for his next pitch. Trying to intimidate these two guys is a big mistake, Brian said to those within earshot. I hope the pitcher tries to throw a fastball past Scooter. The rest of the spectators nodded in agreement as the pitcher threw the ball. He was a strong thrower, and on his next throw, he did something unusual. There was a loud crack as Scooter's bat met the baseball crossing the plate. The stands erupted in cheers as the ball disappeared over the center field fence. Tim ran across the field and waited for his friend to touch home plate, followed by loud cheers. Gertrude watched proudly as her son ran around the bases. She looked at Brian and saw tears on his cheeks. He had spent countless hours practicing on the field and catching balls with Tim and her son. His joy and pride were almost palpable. Gertrude was very grateful to Brian for mentoring her son since they had moved. Horace had grown into a wonderful young man, and Brian had played a huge role in shaping his character. Brenda drove to the pizza place to join Brian and Tim, who were celebrating the team's victory. She found a parking spot quite a distance from the entrance. When she entered the restaurant, she saw Norma Wilson and Brandy Dorn standing too close to her husband. Brenda wasn't surprised when they seemed to disappear when she approached. It made her mentally relive the conversation she had had 2 weeks earlier with her lover, Bill Grant. It's about time we did this in your bed, don't you think? Bill asked as Brenda was getting dressed after sex. You said you wouldn't do it in our bed until Brian and I had sex, Brenda reminded him. I don't want to risk it. Are you really saying you haven't had sex with your husband since the day we fooled around at your place? Her incredulous lover asked. You said I should keep him away from me as long as possible and that you wouldn't insist on sex in our house until he made love to me. He left for the night shift that day and has been sleeping in the room above the garage ever since. We haven't even said hello to each other since. That's crazy, Bill replied. He's too young and you're too sexy for him to lose interest in you. Is he gay? Does he have a girlfriend or something? He's definitely not gay, Brenda insisted. He's very masculine. He would never cheat on me. He just works nights and is almost always tired. He only shows up for dinner, except on weekends when he's gardening and doing other things. No normal man married to a beauty like you would be without her, even if he worked 18 hours a day, Grant declared. He's probably having fun with someone else. That should make it easier for us to meet. He'll get what he deserves and I'll get what used to be his. Brian would never cheat on me, Brenda said firmly. He takes our marriage vows very seriously. He's not the type to have secret affairs. You think so? Bill asked. Well, no. It's just a phase. He's too busy with work and Tim's baseball to pay much attention to me. And I deserve a little fun. I work hard to keep in the house, cook, and work full-time, Brenda reasoned. We know it won't last. Bill smiled, thinking about Brenda's words. I think you're right. Let's just enjoy it while it lasts. Give me a day when I can entertain you in your bed. Remembering Bill's words, Brenda grew concerned as she watched the two beautiful women surrounding Brian walk away. It was obvious that he was interested in the damn attractive women. She realized that she had to protect her marriage from the advances of those bitches. At that moment, she noticed Gertrude sitting alone. Brenda quickly came up with a plan. She smiled broadly and sat down next to the surprised Gertrude. It's good to see you again, Gertrude. Horace has become quite a good ball player and a very sweet boy. You must be very proud of him. Yes, admitted a wary Gertrude. Tim is doing well too. The time Brian spent with them is paying off. He has really become an excellent mentor for Horace. Yes, sometimes Brian is too good, Brenda replied, seeing an opportunity for her assumptions. I'm sure you've noticed the silly blondes who hang around him all the time. I thought maybe you could help me. I know that under normal circumstances, Brian would never joke about that. And how do you think I can help you? Gertrude asked. Pour cold water onto them when they get too close? You know I can't go to most of his games and practices because of work and other commitments, Brenda began cautiously. I know I can trust you with Brian. You're not his type at all. If you could just stay around when I'm not there, I'd be very grateful. I'll tell Brian to stay close to you and be careful. Those husband-stealing bitches will think he's staying with you and hopefully leave him alone. I know it might be awkward for you to pretend, but there's a good reason for it. You could save our marriage. Let me get this straight, Brenda replied skeptically. You're afraid that these attractive, sexy single moms might seduce Brian, so you're asking me to fill in for you when he's at games and practice? You think I'm a safe single mom because I look pretty shabby. I didn't say you were old. I just know Brian. For some reason, he's not likely to fall in love with you instead of a former cheerleader. You'll help him stay faithful. You don't think cheating on your spouse is a solution? Gertrude asked thoughtfully. Wouldn't it be awful if he slept with a bunch of eager ladies just so you could be the only one for him? I hope you're joking, Brenda replied. I love my husband, but I would never tolerate cheating. That's exactly what you're talking about. It destroys the marriage contract. I could never justify infidelity. In my opinion, the marriage would be over. You have to understand how I feel. You've been married for many years. I understand what loyalty and commitment mean. I understand that cheating breaks the marriage contract, Gertrude admitted. I agree. I need to go see Brian. Can I count on you to keep an eye on him while I'm gone? Brenda asked. Of course, Gertrude replied with a smile. Be sure to explain everything to Brian. I'll do my part of the deal. Who better than a modest, boring woman to keep a good man faithful? I wouldn't say that, but you're right. Thanks again, Brenda replied, walking away to her husband. Brenda wanted to talk to me last night before I left for work, Brian began at practice the next day. The gist of it was that there are too many sexy single moms around me. She thinks I'll feel safer if I stick closer to you, Minx, or Gertrude, as she calls you. Why shouldn't I feel safe? You're a smart man. You know you'll never be safe around a single woman, Gertrude said. Minx, you're one of the most attractive women I've ever met, Brian replied sincerely. You've got it all, not just silicone and bleach. You just made my job harder, Gertrude admitted, blushing. I'm going to sign you up for an eye exam after baseball season. You'll see that I have 20/20 vision and I'm very good at reading people with one glaring exception, Brian declared. It seems I misjudged my loving wife. I think she misjudged us, Minx replied. That is, if you really do find me attractive. Brian was amused by the reactions of the single moms when Minx stayed with him. He spent a lot of time chatting and joking with her. The most common reaction was disbelief, followed by disappointment. It took Minx less than one practice to single him out from the crowd. For the next game, the team had to drive 3 hours to Middleburg. It was decided that the team would leave the day before the game and spend the night in a hotel. We hoped that the boys would rest and be fresh for the next challenge. Brian gave Jake Winston's parents a ride, along with Minx. On the way, everyone discussed the team's chances of winning the district and possibly the state championship. They arrived at the hotel right after the team bus. Brian helped Ralph Winston get the luggage out of the trunk. Some parents, including the Winstons, volunteered to accompany the boys and stayed at the same hotel. All the other parents had to book rooms at other hotels. Since several games were scheduled for the next day, many fans and players had gathered in the city. 6 teams from different grade schools were scheduled to play 3 games. Before Tim got on the bus, Brian told him that he would not be staying at the same hotel and that he should behave himself with the coaches and chaperones. He assured his son that he would be at practice the next morning. What hotel are you staying at, Minx? Brian asked, as the Winstons wheeled their suitcases toward the team hotel. The same one as you, she replied simply. I didn't tell you what hotel I was staying at. How did you know? Brian asked, puzzled. I didn't tell you, she replied. How did you know we were staying at the same hotel? It's very crowded here this weekend. You might not be able to find a room at the last minute, Brian pointed out. I'm sure you'll find something, Gertrude replied with a broad smile, which confused Brian even more. A few minutes later, Brian pulled up to the hotel and asked Gertrude, Minx, do you want to go see if you can find a room while I check in? I can wait if you have plans. Thanks, but I'll wait here. I'll be fine, she insisted. When he checked in and received the room keys, Brian finally knew what to do. Returning to the car, he saw that Minx was already waiting for him. Would you like one of these cards for my room? He asked. It's 207. How sweet, Minx exclaimed as she got out of the car, took the keys, and kissed Brian on the cheek. Let's go to bed. We have a long night ahead of us. The next morning, Brian woke up feeling much more tired than when he had gone to bed. At first, he struggled with the thought that he had broken his marriage vows, but Minx helped him deal with it. Let's look at this logically. Not only did Brenda cheat on you, but she also agreed to give up sex with you. Even if she hadn't, she was still putting your health at risk by having unprotected sex with a damn kitten. Essentially, she made sex with her unsafe and undesirable. She released you from your vows and your marriage contract. I haven't had sex in over 2 years. I got tested, and I'm healthy. You got tested after you found out she was cheating on you, and you're healthy. I took the pill over a month ago in the hope of meeting you. Can you honestly give me one reason why we shouldn't sleep together? Is it because of my appearance? Your wife thought I was perfect for all the beautiful women who showed interest in you because she knew you would never be sexually attracted to me. Am I just undesirable? Mix, you are very desirable. Never think that's not true. I've never cheated on Brenda and I need time to get used to this, but you've made a strong case for us being together. I'm ready, Brian said with a smirk. There's something else you should know, Minx replied. Both my parents are in hospice care and by all accounts don't have long to live. My brother sends Horace's game films to his friend. That friend is a baseball coach at the best private school in Los Angeles. If Horace gets a scholarship for next year, we'll probably move back. I really like you, but I'm not looking for a long-term relationship. This can't go on. Look at us. You're a handsome married man with a cheating wife. I'm just a girl with a son who has a chance to get an athletic scholarship to a good university. I have to do what's best for Horace, she concluded. I'm glad to hear about Scooter, Brian said proudly. He's a good kid and a very talented player. I'm glad he'll have the opportunity to hone his skills against strong opponents while getting a good education. You're the main reason the best schools took notice of him. I know how much time and effort you put into him. The irony is that because you were such a good mentor to my son, we have the opportunity to move back to Los Angeles and away from you. I don't think I can handle a one-night stand, Brian worried. Maybe I should just give up sex altogether rather than have one-night stands and become a monk again. You're a silly man. I said we're probably moving to Los Angeles for the next school year. That's more than 6 months. You can do a lot in 6 months, unless you're too old. That remains to be seen. Are you living up to your nickname, Minx? Brian joked. Brian was joking. I'll do it for you, big boy, Minx promised. When you want to see me, just whistle, and I'll teach you how to whistle. I've always been told I'm a good whistler, Brian interjected. Then you're doing something wrong, Gertrude replied. The baseball team won the state championship, and Scooter received a scholarship to a prestigious California school. Gertrude's parents died shortly before Thanksgiving, within a week of each other. Brian and Tim went to their funeral. Brian met Gertrude's brother and liked him immediately. Brian, meet my brother Dexter, Gertrude introduced him. Dexter, this is Horace, baseball coach, and our good friend Brian. Wow, Brian exclaimed. Your name is Dexter? Yes, Gertrude's brother agreed. Only Gertrude and my parents call me Dexter. Everyone else calls me Grim. What's your sister's name? I call her Minx, but don't ask me why, Brian insisted. I don't think I need to ask, Grim replied with a laugh. Brian spent Thanksgiving with Brenda and Tim at her parents' house. For the first time in months, Brian found himself in bed next to Brenda. They always stayed the night on Thanksgiving, and Brian couldn't think of a good reason to break the tradition. Brenda slowly took off her clothes, standing in front of Brian. We haven't slept together in a long time, Brenda purred. You must be in desperate need of love. Love me. Brian felt uncomfortable with her next comment, even when he responded. Are you finally admitting that you need to be taken care of? I knew you'd break down. You're a pathetic bastard. You're not going anywhere in the next few years with that attitude, Brenda snorted. What's wrong with you? Forget I ever even considered letting you touch me. Fine, Brian replied, turning his back on Brenda. He didn't think about his response, even though it wasn't like him. At least he had achieved his goal of avoiding sex with Brenda. However, Brian regretted that his marriage had reached this point. Brenda was bothered by Brian's cutting remark, which kept her awake. Lying next to him, she wondered if he knew about her affair, or if he was just regretting that they hadn't had sex in a long time. She decided she would definitely talk to Bill about it. If she slept with Brian, he shouldn't expect to have sex with Brenda in their marital bed. This statement made her avoid her husband and deny his feelings, which could eventually make him suspicious. It could destroy her marriage. When Brian worked the night shift, he had a set routine. He would come home, have breakfast, and go to bed by 9 in the morning. Around 2 in the afternoon, he was often woken up by Minx climbing into bed with him naked. They would make love for an hour, after which she would leave to be home when Scooter returned from school. Baseball season was over. This allowed Brian to shower and shave when Tim came home from school. In the evening, Brian often had time to take a nap before going to work. Overall, Brian and Minx had a good time together. One evening in early December, shortly after Brian got to work, Tim called him. Dad, Scooter, Heather, Holly, and I are driving in Heather's car. You said we could stay out until midnight because there's no school tomorrow. We have a problem. Heather was driving Mom's car. We have a flat tire, and there's no spare in the trunk. We're stuck on D Street, and I'm a little worried. I can see a few guys from the arcade looking in our direction. You broke down on freaking D Street? Near the freaking arcade? Brian scolded. We'll talk about that later. Is Heather driving that Corolla? Yes, it's a 2017 Corolla, Tim replied quickly. I'll find a suitable wheel and tire and be right there. Keep the doors locked and call the police if there are any problems. Keep an eye on the girls. Brian put his phone in his pocket and headed for the production floor. He quickly found the person he was looking for. Gus, you still drive the Corolla, right? Brian asked the bearded man operating a forklift. I need a tire that fits your car and I need it now. While Brian was talking to Gus, another thought occurred to him. Jack Reynolds was walking by. Jack was Holly's uncle. His younger sister was Holly's mother. Jack, my son and his friends are stuck on D Street with a flat tire and no spare. Holly is with them. I'll get a tire from Gus and drive over there. I'd appreciate it if you would come with me. I have a real spare tire, not one of those damn knockoffs, Gus said. Let's take my car and go there right now. Jack, Gus, and Brian headed straight for the door leading to the parking lot. They were worried about the kids who were out in that part of town late at night. It was no place for good kids, especially teenage girls. Brenda lay in bed, enjoying the warmth she always felt after drinking with Bill. The phone rang, and he glanced at the number. Damn, it's Heather. I have to answer or she'll be on my case for ignoring her. Brenda could only hear one side of the conversation, but she was concerned by what she overheard. Oh, what are you kids doing out there? This is very bad. Those guys are old enough to handle a little problem like this. Call 555. It's not my fault your mother is too stupid to keep a spare tire in the car. What was that? Brenda asked as soon as Bill hung up. Nothing to worry about, Bill replied. Several young men were standing around Heather's car when Brian and his friends pulled up behind her. Brian quickly got out of the car and took the jack and wheel wrench out of Gus's trunk. Gus brought the spare tire, and Jack knocked on the driver's side window and asked Heather to roll it down so he could talk to her. Stay quiet until we change the tire. If those jerks start causing trouble, we'll deal with them. Holly, you'll have to explain to your mom how you ended up on D Street. Brian moved the jack behind the rear wheel and slid it under the frame. He raised the jack until it was level with the frame, then walked over to the wheel to unscrew the lug nuts. While Brian was working on the wheel, the leader of the tough guys approached Jack. You're on our turf. You need my permission before you touch that car. Before Jack could respond, Brian swung the wheel-changing device around and hit the guy in the shins. The guy fell to his knees and then rolled on the ground, rubbing his shins and cursing. Brian grabbed the guy by the collar and dragged him face down, laying him next to the flat tire. Then he sat on the man's back and started unscrewing the lug nuts. The two nearest gang members rushed toward him, clearly intending to drag Brian away from their incapacitated leader. Jack kicked the first one in the head, and he fell to the ground. When Gus stepped forward, the second guy backed away, out of reach. Lift the car up a little, I'll pull the wheel out, Brian said calmly to Jack. Jack continued to gather strength, while the gang of thugs shouted insults and curses at the men. From time to time, the guy under Brian tried to wriggle out from under him, but Brian grabbed him by his greasy hair, lifted his head a few inches, and pressed him roughly against the asphalt. It only took 2 lessons for the guy on the ground to decide not to move. Brian unscrewed the nuts and removed the wheel. He borrowed a good wheel from Gus and put it back in place. When all the bolts were tightened, Jack lowered the car. All 3 men seemed oblivious to the gang members who had been taunting them while they worked. Brian tightened the nuts and stood up. Stepping over the wheel, he accidentally kicked the gang leader in the balls. "You stupid bastards, are you talking to us?" Brian asked, walking toward the gathered gang members and casually tossing the wrench from hand to hand. As soon as he approached them, the group scattered. "Guys, get out of here," Jack ordered as Brian drove the gang away from the car. "Be careful not to run over those stupid bastards lying on the street and stay away from this part of town." The 3 men got into Gus's car and followed Heather, who drove to the next intersection and turned toward the shelter. "I can't believe you kicked that dumb bastard in the shin like that," Gus laughed. "He fell like a sack of shit." "Thanks for taking me with you," Jack added. "My arm hurts, but it felt good to smash that punk's head in." "And then you sat on that asshole while I changed the tire," Gus laughed. "That was fun to watch." The men were still laughing and discussing their exploits when they returned to their workstations. By morning, the story had spread throughout the factory. Stories of bravery and adventure were always popular, especially on the night shift. They helped pass the night more quickly and distract from fatigue and sleepiness. The next day, when Brian woke up, Minx jumped into his bed and kissed him passionately. She was naked and clearly looking at him with desire. "Horace told me what happened last night. You were magnificent. Thank you for taking such good care of the children," Minx admired. "You were lucky. I would have come earlier, but I had to wait for Horace and Tim to visit the girls. They don't have school today." Brenda had only been working for an hour when Sue Bain approached her at the water cooler. It was obvious she wanted to talk. "I heard that Brian, Jack Reynolds, and Gus Benson beat up some potential troublemakers who surrounded a guy's car on D Street. I understand that a blow to the shin with a tire iron quickly knocks the wind out of troublemakers." Brenda understood immediately. Heather had called her father last night and asked for help, but he had dismissed her. Apparently, the problem was more serious than Bill had thought. Sue had used the word kids, so she was probably referring to Holly, as well as Horace and her son Tim. "I'm curious to hear what you've heard," Brenda replied. "I'd like to know how much of it is true." By the time Sue finished telling her about the rumors, Brenda was furious with Bill Grant, even though he hadn't told Sue about them. His daughter had turned to him for help in a situation that could have ended in disaster, and Bill had simply dismissed her concerns. Brian, as well as Gus and Holly's Uncle Jack, reacted as men should have reacted. They protected the children and helped them get out of a bad situation. Bill ignored his daughter's distress, choosing instead to have sex with Brenda. The realization that she had slept with a man who refused to help his own daughter and some of her friends, including Tim, hurt her deeply. How low had she fallen? Brian was 10 times better than Bill. The saddest part was that Brenda had known this all along. Why had she ever gotten involved with this selfish, pompous jerk? Early the next morning, Brenda found Bill in the break room eating a snack while his truck was being repaired. Without wasting any time, she confronted him. "Heather called you last night asking for help and you brushed her off. Those kids could have been in serious danger and you told her to call 555. What kind of father are you?" "Everything turned out fine," Bill replied. "Your husband and his friends saved the day, so what's the problem?" Brian acted like a real man. "You abandoned your daughter? That's the problem. My son was in that car." "If your man is so special, why am I eating your brains and he hasn't eaten in months?" Bill asked with a smirk. "I think I'm better than that weakling in every way that matters," Bill replied and took another sip of soda. "That's it. I'm done with you," Brenda declared. "Don't ever try to talk to me again. I want nothing to do with you." "Whatever," Bill replied calmly. "If you change your mind, you know where to find me. I'll still entertain you if you ask nicely." Brenda burst into tears and ran out of the room. She had cheated on her husband, insulted him, risked her marriage and family for a petty, selfish sociopath. She just hoped Brian would never find out how stupid she had been. At that thought, she realized she had a lot to fix. Minx had just brought Brian to a powerful climax when she heard sobbing behind her. Turning around, she saw Brenda staring at her with tears streaming down her cheeks. "How could you do this to me?" Brenda cried. I trusted both of you, and this is how you treat me? I'm just fulfilling your wishes, Minx replied, pulling on her clothes and putting her finger to Brian's lips to silence him. But you wanted me to keep the blondes from getting their hands on Brian. I sacrificed my body to achieve your goal. I didn't want you to sleep with him, and you know that, Brenda replied, her anger giving way to tears. I can't believe Brian could change me like this, and with some skinny bitch. I understand that it's not easy for you to find out that Brian and I were fine, but that's no reason to insult me, Minx reasoned. Your poor husband was ready to explode. I'm just helping him relieve some stress. Bill Grant didn't want you sleeping with your husband, so Brian had to turn to someone else. Luckily, I was in the right place at the right time. You can thank me for helping you push Brian away completely and make Bill happy. Where's Bill? Is he in your bed? You know about Bill? Brenda exclaimed. Well, yes, Mix replied. I think almost the entire free world knows about Bill. You slept with him for months. He promised you he would entertain you in the marriage bed every time you had sex with Brian, so you stopped having sex with your own husband. Fortunately, Bill was able to fill that void, if I'm not mistaken. If Brian knew, why didn't he say anything? Why did he let Bill and me continue our relationship for so long? Brenda asks, tears streaming down her cheeks. You're a smart girl. What would most men do if they found out their wife was a cheater and a whore? He would have been very angry and yelled at me. And then he probably would have divorced me, Brenda added, as the reality of the situation became more apparent. That sounds plausible. What happens next? Will Brian and Tim stay here and will you move in with Bill? Minx asked quietly. Minx asked quietly. Minx asked quietly. I'm not leaving my home, or Tim's home either. If Brian wants a divorce, he'll have to leave. He'll pay child support and alimony. And Tim will stay with me, Brenda concluded. That's exactly what Brian thinks will happen, Minx agreed. Let's assume that his main goal is to stay close to Tim and be the best father he can be. How will he achieve that goal? By not divorcing me, Brenda replied quietly. He stayed for Tim, not for me. He found out about my relationship with Bill and basically divorced me. Just not officially. We've been living like a divorced couple for months, haven't we? I was just too stupid to realize it. In my defense, I'm just a skinny bitch who showed up after you ruined everything. I helped Brian heal his wounds. I told Bill that it's over between us. I don't want to see him anymore, Brenda declared. And this after he refused to help his daughter get out of a bad situation last night? You had no choice, right? Minx asked rhetorically. Even cheaters have certain expectations and limits. Are you and Brian going to live together now? Brenda asked, wiping tears from her eyes. To be honest, we're quite happy with what we have. Horace and I will be back in Los Angeles before the school year starts, Minx said. I'd prefer he didn't know that his mother was having an affair with his best friend's father, if you can manage that. When it's time to leave, I'll probably help Brian choose a new partner if he'll let me. As you can see, I didn't steal your husband like the other moms hoped I would. We're just enjoying each other's company for now, just like you and Shithead. What if I don't let this continue? He's my husband. You have no right to sleep with him, Brenda insisted. You gave me that right the moment you decided to spread your legs for Bill Grant, Minx replied. That freed Brian from any obligations to you. We have an exclusive relationship. We can trust each other, if you can imagine that. Brian was told that he couldn't sleep with you or anyone else if he wanted me to stay, added Minx. Who knows what other horrors Bill Grant has slept with and what diseases he might have. Brenda burst into tears again, thinking about the words of the woman she knew as Gertrude. Could Bill have been sleeping with someone else on the side? Of course he could. Brenda no longer had any illusions about what kind of man Bill Grant was. She needed to get tested as soon as possible. What happens now? Brenda asked anxiously. Let's just live as we did before. I'll come and wake Brian up as often as I can. You work late and avoid him as much as you can. I think everything will be fine. If nothing's broken, there's nothing to fix, Minx replied. I'm not going to do that, Brenda said firmly. You're leaving in a few months. I'm staying here and showing Brian what a wonderful wife I am. He doesn't need your skinny ass. Only he knows that my skinny ass is loyal to him, and yours is out there waiting for anyone to stroke it, Minx retorted. Basically, I control your sex life, or at least your sex life with Brian. I won't let him anywhere near your disgusting sewer while he's with me. I don't want to risk getting infected, and he's not thrilled about it either. I realized, albeit too late, that there's much more to a relationship than sex, Brenda declared with feigned bravery. In fact, sex without love and commitment is just degrading. I'll do what a wife should happily do for her husband, and you'll just give him sex. Think about it. Okay, Minx replied. I've already thought about it. Let's do this. You'll cook him a delicious lasagna and meatloaf, make sure the bathrooms are clean, and wash the stains out of his boxers. Let's see who's happier. Brian, I have to tell you how ashamed I am and how sorry I am for treating you so disrespectfully. Will you ever be able to forgive me? Brenda pleaded. How can he ever trust you again? Minx asked. He may forgive you someday, but how the hell are you going to regain his trust? That's always been the stumbling block for cheaters. I advise you to try to enjoy the next few months while you're still Brian's wife, even if only in name. Realize what you gave up for perverted sex and learn from it. Brian doesn't want to break up the family while Tim is in school. You'll have about 9 months after I leave to do everything you can to get him back. When Tim finishes school, Brian will probably kick you out, Minx predicted. Brian, why are you letting her speak for you? Brenda asked. I'm not just his mistress, I'm his best friend, Minx replied. While you were whispering sweet nothings in Bill's ear, Brian and I were having a heart-to-heart. I promised him I'd handle this situation if it came up. And he promised to knock my brains out as soon as I did. Could you leave us alone, please? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next video.